We're going to get started. My name is Elizabeth Butler, and I am the Director of Economic Development at the Chamber. Thank you for joining us today so we can talk about manufacturing during COVID-19. I remember when the governor's orders first came out. What did essential manufacturing mean? We were all trying to figure out who was essential, which product lines were essential, which employees were essential, what everything meant. Somehow we all figured out the details, the new details, and manufacturing community became split. Some were able to stay open, some were forced to close, and some were even took on new roles, found a way to manufacture PPE to be able to have limited product lines open. Now that we are opening back up, we thought it would be a good idea for those who have continued manufacturing to share with those opening back up or those who are trying to increase their capacity. We have a close-knit community here in Northwest Ottawa County. The goal today is to share the experiences and lessons learned so that others can be helped. Today, we have three panelists with us. We have Rob Payne from R.A. Miller in Grand Haven. Rob is the general manager at R.A. Miller. We have Sonia Warber from SBI Pharma, who is also with us from Grand Haven. She is the VP of HR at SBI. Both R.A. Miller and SBI Pharma have remained open during the pandemic. We also have Deb Zeal from MIOSHA with us. She is the Senior Occupational Safety Consultant at MIOSHA. Our panelists will be talking for 30 minutes. Then we will be opening the remaining time for question and answer. We will be using the Q&A feature in the Zoom webinar. In it, I will monitor the questions and directing them to the panelists as they come up. In addition, we will be recording this webinar and posting it on our website for future viewing. So let's get started. Rob, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. And I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let me get. All right. All right, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. Elizabeth, a week or so ago, asked me if I would be willing to share our experience going through really the past month and a half dealing with COVID-19. I think that we have had an interesting road that we've traveled from when this first started in late March. And I kind of want to share with everybody kind of what happened with us, what we've done, some of the key learnings that we have taken away from this. So like Elizabeth said, we remained open during the shutdown order. We are an essential manufacturer doing defense products. So all of our customers were still expecting that we delivered product. So we remained open. All of our employees were still coming to work. We had one employee test positive for COVID-19 on April 13th. We had two more employees test positive on April 16th. And we had a total of 7 employees test positive over that 2-week period. And we voluntarily shut down for 10 days on April 16th. So I can tell you, we went into this in late March. We had plans in place and we thought that, we were responding and doing everything we could. And, as they say, best laid plans, that kind of all got blown apart in mid-April. So what did we do initially in late March? So we formed a COVID-19 response team. So that was made up of myself, our head of HR and finance, and our operations director. So we met daily during this period. And, really that was an interesting time because it felt like things were changing, not on a daily basis, but on an hourly basis, and trying to respond and adapt to new executive orders, to best practices, engaging with our legal counsel, we utilize our insurance agency quite a bit, and really trying to understand what do we need to do to respond to this emerging crisis. So one of the first things we did is we zoned our facility. So we went out and we took a look at our manufacturing operations and we split people into zones. And this was to encourage social distancing, and with the anticipation that we most likely would have someone test positive at some point, and we would have a better idea for the contact tracing to understand what zone they were in. So we limited people to specific bathrooms, we staggered breaks and lunches, identified specific doors to enter and exit to try to keep people separated within our facility. So again, that was all part of the social distancing that we were trying to do in our operations. We immediately restricted visitors. We increased our cleaning frequency with our third-party cleaning. We offered a COVID-19 pay supplement. And one of the things I'll get to in a few minutes is really trying to break down the decisions that we made or the things that we put in place. Were they psychological, just for the psychological impact on our employees, or were we actually doing something for physical barriers, keeping people separate? And we developed a COVID-19 response plan in preparation for a positive employee test. And I can tell you, after we had a positive case, the plan that we put together got blown out of the window. So post our positive tests, we closed our break rooms. We shut off access to vending, refrigerators, microwaves. We implemented PPE, so everybody now in our facility is wearing face masks. I have mine right here. And we have implemented temperature checks on a daily basis. So employees coming into our building, visitors, in the morning, we have medical staff on site to take temperatures, do the basic health assessment. So it's been quite a journey for us. I think, if I'm looking back to March, and people have always asked me, what would we do differently? What were the mistakes that we made? I think we underestimated the severity of the coronavirus, of where we would be today. I think if you would ask anybody on our leadership team, on our staff back in March, I don't think anybody would have predicted where we ended up. And it's interesting thinking back when we started putting in some of the initial policies, procedures, zoning, staggering breaks. We really had it was split in our facility with our employees. We probably had 50% of our employees think that we were taking, extreme measures, going way too far on limiting breaks, things like that. And then we had another subsection of our population who were already ready to jump to put PPE in. We all need to take the next 60, 90 days off of work. We can't be outside. So really, we were trying to balance these two different beliefs within our employee population of going too far or not far enough. Some of the key takeaways that we had, like I said, we didn't anticipate we would end up here. It has been a journey. Every day, it seems like, and I think it's gotten a lot better for us now. We've, the past 8 weeks, it's been ups and downs and really trying to respond. And, I think we're at executive order number 90 from the state right now, just trying to respond and make sure that we're staying up to date with everything that's coming out on the requirement side, just the mandates from the state, local government officials, things like that. I would say having what I would call our COVID-19 response team, that was crucial for us. Every day, meeting with our HR and operations, really talking through different solutions, policies, procedures, what we need to do. Having the team that met daily and just assessing where we were at was really critical. Our focus really shifted from strategic to reactionary. So back in March, and I think a lot of people would say this, we had big plans for the year. We kind of had a strategic direction that we were going up on, and that got blown to pieces. And we really moved into reactionary, day by day. What do we need to do today to get through today? So looking at the daily regulations, executive orders, employee relations and engagement. So one of the big things that we found when this first happened was just the fear factor. A lot of our employees were fearful to come to work. They were uncertain of what was going to happen. And I think, obviously, without getting into a political discussion, we can talk about just kind of the role, just news, everything like that played into that, but just trying to balance that and understand that people were afraid and people did not want to come to work. And especially with everybody else around being on a shutdown order and the stay-at-home order, and we're still asking our employees to come to work. How do we balance that, be compassionate and understanding, while at the same time balancing our needs to get product out to our customers? We engage with healthcare professionals pretty regularly. So we're fortunate, we have an on-site healthcare clinic that's staffed by fantastic individuals. And we really leveraged that resource and engaged with them on a daily basis. When we started having people go for testing who showed symptoms and signs, we really pushed everybody to utilize our healthcare clinic and let the healthcare professionals there manage care. They were able to get people in for testing when it was somewhat limited and you couldn't get in right away. And they have managed all of our return to work and follow-up care for any of our positive individuals. And since we've had the 7 positive cases, we've had 3 more go in for testing. They've been negative, but we are still having individuals show signs and symptoms. And I think that's something that everybody's going to face over the coming weeks as the economy starts to open back up. Some of the guiding principles that we used as we were looking at decisions. So again, looking at, okay, what are the psychological things that we need to do to keep our employees engaged, keep them coming to work, versus the physical changes that we need to make, from social distancing, shutting break rooms down, microwaves, things like that. We really initially had an employee-focused mindset. So the decisions we made were really focused on our employee population. We eliminated attendance write-ups. We're more flexible on just absences, allowing people to take unpaid time off. But we are now shifting back into finding a balance that balances the employee versus the business. So I think as we move through the past 8 weeks, everybody is adjusting to what I would say is a new normal at work. And we're really now trying to find a balance that balances the continued need for our employees to, whether they need time off, things like that, versus our business needs. I think the reality is we realize that we're going to be living with this for a while. It's not going away anytime soon. It's really trying to find that balance. My 10 minutes, those are some of the key things that we went through. Again, like I said, it was an interesting journey with having 7 positive cases and in that week period. I think one of the things that I've taken away from this just personally is just how can I engage with our employee population, whether that is recording videos, sending them out, doing virtual town halls, leveraging technology that we have. I think that I've realized is more important now than ever, and just reassuring everybody that we are doing all that we can. I will since we have MyOSHA on the call today, we did have an employee file an OSHA complaint after we had the positive cases. And I would anticipate that others may face that as well. But I was fully confident that we had everything in place to respond to that, and know that we had done all that we could. And our response was, the feedback we got was we were far and above what others are doing, and that we were well on top of any executive order recommendations, requirements. But after the first few cases, we did have an employee that went in and did file an anonymous OSHA complaint against, I'm not quite sure what it was, whether that we had a positive case or not, but we did have to deal with that. So I would be happy at the end to answer any questions, kind of elaborate on any of these points. But now I will toss it over to Sonia at SPI. So let me stop sharing here.
Good morning. I am going to share my screen as well. Give me just a second to pull that up. Yes, I am. It's not the right screen. Let me get up the right screen. Let's try this one. Still not the right one. Because you guys are just saying I can control, correct? Sorry for that. I'm just going to pull this over. We're going to do it a little bit different. So COVID. As you know, I'm with SPI Pharma. We're a pharmaceutical company, so we are an essential employer. So we did work. We have not shut down. We've actually gained business because we do make the ingredients that go into drugs that help people with some of the symptoms that they have for COVID. Just like Ari Miller, like Rob talked about, we had an SPI crisis management team that met daily. Our crisis team was global because we are a global company. So we did have insights from our September France site as we were moving through this. So we had some direction as they dealt with the virus before we did. The site manager, Todd Lombard, was on that team and helped communicate what was happening with COVID globally down to our site. Response plan, similar communication upwards to the executives, communication to the plant, and with affected employees. We developed a decision-making tree, which is similar when you have a positive case. What are you going to do? How long does the employee need to stay home? What needs to be cleaned? We did the risk in low, medium, and high. We did not have a person test positive at SPI as of this point. We did have 2 individuals who were in close contact with a positive employee. So we did have to do a couple of deep cleans after those situations. We did extend our cleaning contract with our third party, and we have a decontamination company that we were working with as well for the positive cases. One of the things we did back in March was we identified employees who had underlying conditions that we needed to be concerned about, and what can we do to help get them out of the facility if we can. If they're an essential worker, what can we do to protect them? And identify the essential versus the non-essential, who really needed to be on site to manufacture the product, who could work from home and still do their job. We got those daily updates from corporates. We worked on training our employees on what to do, PPE, sanitation, all of that sort of information that they needed back at the beginning of March. Just like Rob said, we limited travel, non-essential visitors, contractors, and we went to non-essential employees about March 18th. So we did that very early on. Still only essential employees are going to work. When we do start allowing regular employees, non-essential employees like myself to come back to work, it's going to be in waves. We don't want all 35 people coming back to the site at one time. So we're going to do it in a slow, methodical process based on who needs to be at the site first. And again, we did a lot of postings of symptoms and what to look for throughout the site as well to make sure it was very visible when you walked into the lunchroom. Am I feeling any of these things? Do I have a temperature? Do I have a cough? What do I have as part of the training process? We also did health questions before entry into SPI. These are posted at the entranceways. Are you feeling ill? Do you have any COVID symptoms? Been in contact with anybody? And then you're not even allowed to enter the plant. We are doing temp taking. This was one of our biggest bumps. It took us a while to get the gun in, and our employees really wanted us taking temperatures sooner earlier because we did have the positive employees who were exposed to a positive employee before we had this in place. Once we got the no contact gun in, we also have forehead strips and and the disposable under the tongue temperature taking device as well. The thought was, who's going to be doing the temperatures? We don't have an on-site healthcare professional to do this for us. We originally were going to go with the management team, all of us take a day, a shift, go in, and we were responsible for that day. Our employees stood up very strongly and said, we don't want you here. We don't want to be exposed to anybody who doesn't need to be in the plant. Stay home. Team leaders, senior operators will take care of taking the temperatures, monitoring the health screening as their shift comes into work. So we started doing that. We wanted to keep everybody outside, but that did not, and then using the night bell to inform senior, the team leaders that somebody was there, a vendor, uniform people, the MAP people, that they were there and needed their temperature check. The phone was ringing nonstop. So we went to, we're a lockdown facility. So if you can get into the building with your swipe card, then they had the walkie-talkie there to call a team leader to come up and have their temperature taken. We did have the mask, gloves, sanitizer, and we kept a log of who was coming into the building and who was testing, not necessarily for compliance, but to show that we were being compliant, that everybody was being tested, and we could audit to make sure that this was happening, even though management wasn't there to ensure that. Again, if that person was sent home, and call HR to find out the next steps. Social distancing, as we all know, is very important. We covered all of our water bottles. We are getting reusable waters that an employee can keep on site, so they're not bringing things from home where it may be exposed from somebody in the home, bringing it into the work site. The lunchroom and meeting areas were a challenge. Our employees are very social. They like to talk. They have their own chair that they sit at every day for lunch, and they talk with their fellow buddies every day, and they weren't doing a good job of social distancing, so we had to go in and actually remove chairs and left one per table. Same with the meeting rooms, because we did use those for video calls. We just mapped traffic flow areas in small aisleways in the past week, ensuring that when you go into the lunchroom, it's one-way traffic, one way out. We had people who shared offices. We separated them and put them into conference rooms to keep that social distancing apart. We have startup stand-up meetings. We mark spots on the floor where people can stand so that they're not within 6 feet. And we did have some areas that we could not have the workspace be farther than 6 feet because they work in the quality control lab. And we put barriers in between those workstations. We tried to stagger breaks and lunches. That has not worked for us. Just with our product line, it just hasn't. So they've been taking breaks and lunches, one per table. And if there's more than tables allowed, they'll go into conference rooms or other open offices to have their lunch. Signs for distance posting. And we talked this past week really about respecting other space. Rob talked about the 50-50 split of those who really are engaged. Where's the thermometers? Why are we working? Why are we here? To those who are like, oh, it's no big deal. And we wanted to make sure that the people that were most sensitive, that their needs were being respected, that they had their personal space. And that was one of our challenges at first is, oh, it's not a big deal. And then poke at the person. And so we had to have that discussion early on. Hygiene, sanitation, PPE. We're unique where we have suites that our operators work in. We have 10 of them. There's usually one operator per suite, sometimes 2. So they do work individually where we do not necessarily have to zone off areas of the plant. You're in suite, the spray dryer, you're in the granulator 1, you're in Grand 2. So we have hand sanitizers in every suite just as part of our business. Employees put on gloves before they walk into the suite. They sanitize as part of their daily routine. So this was not so much of an issue for us with the hand sanitizers. Disinfecting wipes so they could clean up after them and before them in the lunchroom and by copiers. We are struggling to find the disinfectant wipes now. So we'll be moving to an alcohol sanitizer that our lab has along with paper towels and making sure that we have that available. Extra cleaning. Having the sanitization available for the high-lows, pallet jacks, things you wouldn't necessarily think of, the shared tools. We do have these UV wands coming in, and I have a UV phone case for employees to put their cell phones in. When we do start bringing back non-essential employees, we all have our laptops at home, what's it been exposed to, so we can wand off our personal belongings when we return to work. Already talked about the mask, gloves, and we required the masks are required for close contact for us. We are hiring, we are training, so we do have employees that require that face-to-face conversation. The struggle we're having is when you wear a mask and you have the safety glasses on, the masks are fogging up. Trying to get anti-fogging wipes in that I heard work, some don't. I've heard from a triathlete put some baby shampoo non-tear on the inside of the glasses, that will help. I've heard putting Band-Aids underneath will help. I've heard lots of different stories, but we still haven't quite figured that out yet. So any ideas, would love to hear them. This was our decontamination company that did come in when we had the 2 people who were exposed to 2 positive other individuals. So that's kind of what that looks like. It was very interesting. They were in within a couple hours. We sent everybody home. They did a fog mist. They were in and out. We were back up running probably 6 hours later. So it was very quickly done. But again, we haven't had the employee test positive yet, and hopefully we won't. We've been encouraging employees to stay home if sick. One of the words of wisdom is we have all of these things that employees can use, and keeping track of where they're getting their money from, and trying to explain that to the employee who just got that phone call. You were just exposed and HR is telling you got to be home for 2 weeks. Where's my money coming from? We're also struggling with employees who don't have daycare. We've gone through that as well. So we have somebody on intermittent leave for daycare issues. So making sure that we're tracking her time accordingly, along with her regular FMLA. And you have the Michigan paid sick leave, and you've got your normal short-term disability. We pay 100%. So it's a nice benefit for our employees, but keeping track of, okay, making sure that we get the tax benefits first before we flip it to one of the others. And they also have PTO and vacation. So our employees financially have a lot of opportunities to stay home, receive full pay, should they not be feeling well. First thing, would tell them, call your doctor. I'm not an expert, but keep in contact with me. As Rob said, when he had the positives, that tracing, where was that person at? Who did they talk to? Which restroom did you use? When you have that first conversation, that's probably the one thing I did learn from those two situations, is knowing where they were, what areas they were in, and who did they talk to. And then the employees who they talked to have this high angst now as well. Okay, I've been exposed to somebody who's been exposed. What do I need to do? What do I need to watch for? So that all came into play as well. Yeah, we cleaned probably more aggressively than the CDC guidelines. The one had been out of the plant for 3 days. We deep cleaned anyways. He was exposed to somebody in his household. The other one was at a side job and was exposed. I think that's it on that. And then the last thing that really has come fruition through, this is a change, and people don't necessarily like change. And it's going to continue to be a change as new employees come back, not just for the essential workers, but for the non-essential workers. Like Rob said, they feel safe at home, and now they're being exposed and they have to come to work and dealing with that anxiety. SHRM had an article online a week or so ago that 40% of people have a mental health issue during this crisis. And you look at the essential workers who are there, then they go home, maybe to an empty house after dealing with somebody they didn't want to work with all day, and they can't go anywhere. So there's a lot of anxiety of being enclosed either just at home or just at work and just at home. So making sure that you have your EAP available, that phone number, the handouts available for your employees for that sort of help. And again, the differing views and beliefs and what their rights are and what we should not be doing. The other thing is calling and just checking in while your employees are not at work. Hey, how's daycare going? How's school going? How's your family doing? And really making sure you're keeping that connection with your employees to make sure that they feel safe and they have your support. So that's what I have. So I'm going to turn it over to Deb now.
All right, thank you, Sonia.
Yep.
And give me a minute to share. Let's see. And like all good government employees, I have lots of information. I have a few slides here, and if you're interested, I did send Nancy and Amy the presentation this morning, so they could share this out to you later. Okay, are you guys seeing my presentation? Okay, so to quickly kind of move through this, maybe. I've been giving presentations probably for the last month, and I've heard some concerns from other people basically saying that they have had some experience with MIOSHA because they've had complaints. To give you an idea of how many complaints MIOSHA is currently having, we've had a 5,000% monthly increase in the last 2 months. Very much like unemployment, we're just kind of overwhelmed. People who are going to work don't necessarily want to be going to work. We have a large population of that. We have to respond to every formal complaint. So we've been keeping very busy on the enforcement side, as well as they've started recruiting people from our other divisions as well to start responding to these complaints as well. But our job obviously is to follow MIOSHA rules. So Just to give you an idea, executive orders, although they are put out by the governor, MIOSHA only has authority over MIOSHA rules. So I wanted to share the ones that we are looking at quite stringently. We're looking at your personal protective equipment plans. What do you have in place? Hazard communication, as you introduce new cleaners, as you introduce new chemicals, how you're disinfecting, etc. Make sure that your hazard communication plan keeps up to date along with your training. Respirators. So the N95s and up, your half face respirators, etc. Those fall under the respiratory protection program. So those would require that you have a program in place if you are requiring your employees to wear the N95s and up, which is not the same thing as having a cloth mask or a surgical mask. Those are not mandated. They have no respiratory protection requirements under MIOSHA standards, but it is an educational thing that the governor is pushing for. And if you require it, you need to train on it. Record keeping. There has to be a clear case of COVID to COVID contact within your facilities. We don't see it much in manufacturing. We do see it quite often in healthcare systems. So if there are multiple COVID-19 positive cases in healthcare, it's almost automatic that it's going to be a recordable case. Not so in manufacturing, unless you have a large outbreak, kind of like our meat processing plants. And sanitation under our health rules for Part 474. What are you doing to disinfect and sanitize and keep your employees safe? And then there's always general duty. So our general duty basically is that you have a known hazard. You've done nothing to stop that hazard from contacting your employees. And with all of the executive orders that have come out and all of the CDC recommendations and all of the MIOSHA and federal OSHA recommendations, you should be doing something. We do have online the guidance for how MIOSHA is currently handling complaints and what we are going to be doing for those. So keep in mind, MIOSHA enforces MIOSHA rules, okay? But if you did not see the governor's announcement yesterday, she did put out an executive order, 2020-91, under LEO, the Labor and Economic Opportunity, which basically says all manufacturers, all businesses going back to business by June 1st have to put together a COVID-19 preparedness response plan and turn it into LEO. And there's a link on the LEO site for you to do that, as well as emails, as well as on the executive order if you go online. So that is something that the governor did put out yesterday, has quite a few requirements in there. And if you look at, I believe it was section 4, they talked about what's going to be required in your plan for manufacturing. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more as well. So we understand that this is an evolving situation. So we've been trying to keep up as well. We did put a couple of guidelines together for employers and employees. It's available on our webpage. It's a pre-recorded by our MIOSHA staff PowerPoint for both the employers and the employees. You can show it to your employees. It's about COVID-19, how to protect yourself, things along those lines. We've also created a 1-800 new hotline number that you can call for COVID-19 questions if you have any of those. We've also put some clarification guidelines together for construction and manufacturing sectors. And again, in this PowerPoint, anything that has been highlighted in blue is a direct link to all of those PowerPoints that I'm referring to. So if you would like to get a copy, make sure you get a hold of Nancy or Amy. Employers must create a written exposure control plan. That is now an executive order, as well as enforceable because of the CDC and the MIOSHA and federal OSHA guidelines. So in your written exposure control plan, there are lots of good examples, and I've given you links a couple of slides down. Lots of good examples out there, but it has to address how are you going to control the spread of COVID-19 within your facility. So with every hazard that MyOSHA looks at, we're looking at a hierarchy of controls. Can you eliminate the possibility? Can you substitute the possibility of getting in contact with that hazard? Can you engineer out the possibility of getting in contact with that hazard? If you cannot engineer it out, how do you administratively control it? And that includes hand hygiene, environmental surface disinfection, personal protective equipment, make sure your training is up to date, your hazard assessments are up to date. What are you going to be doing for health surveillance? Does that involve a daily questionnaire and temperature taking, which is what the guidance from the governor is recommending in that 2020-91? And then continuing training on the spread of COVID-19, how you're going to prevent it, what you're expecting as an employer of your employees to assist in not having that spread. So training is something that I'm going to push. If you want to stop having people call into MyOSHA and making formal complaints, keep them up to date on what you are doing. Is going to be required as you put into place this exposure response plan, that if there are changes in the way that you're going to be doing business, you need to train your employees on what those changes are, why those changes are taking place. And I've heard both of the other speakers say that communication is key. Communication is absolutely key. Keeping in contact with your employees, continuing to update them on what's going on in the state of Michigan, what's going on in your own house, the changes that you're putting in place to keep them safe is going to be absolutely necessary if you want to avoid a formal complaint to MyOSHA. So a couple of best practices I wanted to point out. Again, there's a link that I've put in here for best practices to employers to protect themselves from exposure to COVID-19, pushing the 20-second hand washing, making it available, making sure people keep their distancing when they're going up to the sinks. A common question I got at first was, do I have to have antibacterial soap? And the answer is no, regular soap will work just fine. So don't feel like you have to run out and get antibacterial soap. Soap itself will lift off the germs, and washing for 20 seconds is effective. Clean and disinfect frequently. Put a plan together, stay at home. If you or someone or in your house is sick, how are you going to handle that as an employer? Push and put up signs and do training about avoiding touching your eyes, your nose, your mouth, etc. And then self-screening. If you go to the MyOSHA web page right now, this is what our front page kind of looks like. So if you went to michigan.gov /MyOSHA, everything here is a link. So we have an interim enforcement plan, COVID-19 frequently asked questions, know your employment rights, know your guidance for when you can leave your home, perform in-person work, COVID-19 guidelines, like I mentioned before, and there's links above for the YouTube presentations for employers and employees. I encourage you to use them in your own houses. And then the construction industry and manufacturing industry guidelines is also a PowerPoint presentation. As I mentioned before, I think it went live yesterday. We have now a call-in number 855-SAFE-C19 for COVID-related questions and MyOSHA. I also put these resources here. MyOSHA has some enforcement guidelines. I mentioned that before. The state of Michigan is constantly updating their information. OSHA's constantly updating theirs. A couple of ones that I'm not sure if everybody's aware of, but I kind of found just kind of going through pieces of information. Maryland Department of Labor put out a fact sheet on respirators and face coverings, which is very helpful for your employees and everyone else to understand. I encourage you to take a look at that one, print it out, train on it, let everybody understand the differences between respirators and face coverings because they're significantly different. The AIHA, American Industrial Hygiene Association, has some very, very helpful back to work safety information sheets. This is something that you can print out and share with your employees as much as you want to. You can post them, etc. And then also yesterday, Dow presented along with the governor, and they said that they have a free playbook, return to work playbook for COVID-19. It's lengthy, it's like 50 pages long, but there is a lot of good information in there. We've provided some guidance as far as putting together your own response plan for COVID-19. Dow put a really, really thorough playbook out there for how they're going to bring their people back to work. So use the resources that are available. I thought I'd just kind of throw a few of them out there. And if you have questions, of course, you can call the MyOSHA number. You can also get a hold of me, and I don't have that here, but my number is 517-719-7485. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Rob and Sonia. I'm going to open it up for questions at this point. We do have, I think, about 5 questions that have come in. So, Deb, if you want to unshare your screen. Now we can see all the panelists' bright and shining faces again. So the first question came in, and it was directed to Sonia, but Rob and Deb might have information as well on this. Can we get more details about SPI's identification of employees with underlying conditions, please? Were any of them hourly workers who could not be accommodated with remote work? How were those handled?
So it was self-reporting for the most part when it came to those with underlying health conditions. We said, okay, COVID's coming. These are some of the things that we need to be aware of. Let us know if you have any conditions that we need to accommodate. And we did have a few people come forward. Most of them were non-essential. All of them were non-essential. So we had no hourly essential employees come forward saying, I cannot work due to an underlying health condition. But it was voluntary disclosure.
Rob, how about you?
Ours worked the same way. So it was voluntary disclosure. So, right as this, back in March when this was happening, we told everybody if they have an underlying health condition or they have, they're concerned not only for themselves, but if they have a family member that they live with that may be immunocompromised or something like that, please come forward and talk to HR. We probably had about 5-6 individuals on our manufacturing team that came forward and raised some concern. And we initially allowed them to take a leave of absence. And since that point, we've been kind of, again, looking at our policies and figuring out what is the most appropriate, again, balancing their needs with the company's needs. So we had someone take a leave of absence. We're allowing people to use PTO with the understanding that, we will be flexible later in the year for if they want to take a vacation, if they've used PTO during this period for some unpaid leaves later in the year. And then again, leveraging the, FCCRA, the emergency sick leave, things like that. So really educating our employees on what options are available, encouraging them if they truly do have an underlying condition, get something from your doctor, things like that we can use, and supporting that. So I will say we did have some employees who claimed they had an underlying health condition, took an unpaid leave of absence, and then they tried to file for unemployment. So we did have some employees who it's their right to, file for unemployment, and they did attempt that, so.
Okay, Deb, did you have anything to add on that question or? Okay. Next question, what company do you guys use for decontamination? Start with Sonia.
We use a company that's located in Battle Creek. I don't know the name of it offhand, but I do know they are not accepting new clients.
Okay.
Yeah, and we use Corporate Cleaning. So I think they're a local company. They come in and they did all of our decontaminations when we had some positive cases.
Okay, another one for Sonia. The person who lived with somebody who was exposed, what was your practice?
We sent him home for 14 days. I talked to him daily. Do you have any symptoms? How you doing? How you feeling? And just stayed in contact with him and allowed him. He came back to work 2 weeks later after being self-quarantined with no symptoms.
Okay. Okay. So Sonia. So there's a UV wand for each non-essential employee?
I have 6 of them coming in. So we have a vestibule that when you first enter our corporate headquarters, it's like an entranceway where you can take off your coats. And that's where the door is locked for you to get into the corporate entrance. We're going to have those available in that vestibule for them to use the UV light to decontaminate their laptops, any files they've brought home, computer screens. I brought my whole office home so I can do that out in the lobby. But we have 6 of those, and then we have 1 of the cell phone, for the cell phone.
Where did you get those and what was the cost on those?
Amazon.
Okay.
I want to say about $60 a piece.
Okay, not too bad. A quick comment came up. I know ServPro and ServiceMaster can also provide cleaning services too. Okay, next question. What was the shared tool handling practice in your workplace? How was it enforced? Want to start with that one, Rob?
Yeah, so we do have a number of areas where there is some shared tooling, and we as we analyze cleaning procedures and decontamination, we have at every workstation we have the cleaning wipes and cleaner at each station, and we've trained our employees that when you're done using a tool, you need to wipe it off and decontaminate it and clean it before it goes back or before someone else uses it. So when we first started back in back in March, we really relied on a number of us in the management team. We're doing a lot of the cleaning of the break rooms and things like that, and we've now really progressed and moved to training our employees and educating them on the importance that they play in keeping the facility clean and decontaminating, their workstation, the tools that they touch, things like that.
Sonia?
We just started this practice and getting this in place over the past week, maybe. So it's really having the wipes available on the high-low so they can just grab them when they get in and on and off. When they're in the suite, it's not such a concern because they do have the gloves and they sanitize. Anytime they touch something, they need to sanitize for our regular production, let alone with this. So it's really just the high-lows and the pallet jacks and just having the wipes available. They're self-monitoring each other because we have not had management on site. Okay. So it's really, really employee owned, and they're owning it. They're doing a great job.
And how are you keeping your employees from becoming complacent during this? Is that possible?
I think that's starting to bubble up more as things start to open up more and more, that it's becoming more of, less compliant with some of these things. It's getting better. So I think that's going to be part of the ongoing struggle.
I would say for a while, it was hard for our employees to become complacent because everything was changing on a daily basis. So they'd get used to something and we would change it on them or something would change. But again, I think it goes back to the communication education piece. So just really reinforcing the importance of all the practices that we're putting in place. And even though someone may not agree with it, it's they're keeping their neighbor healthy, keeping their their fellow employees, their friends, things like that. We're doing it for them, we're doing it for each other, and just kind of reinforcing. And we had an issue when we first went to the PPE and face masks. We'd see some people walking around with it not on their face, and just the constant reminder of just encouraging everybody, hey, please wear it, use it. And just it really comes down to just reinforcing what we're trying to do, and everybody kind of owning that, and like Sonia said, self-monitoring each other. So their neighbors telling them they need to wear it or things like that.
Okay, Rob, this question is for you. You stated you moved from strategic to reactional. Do you think this could have been avoided?
So that's a tough one for us. So I look back and I say, okay, what could we have done differently? I don't think it could have been, our situation. I don't necessarily think it could have been avoided. So back in early March, before really everybody was talking about this, I can pinpoint a few people who got sick At the time, no one was really even testing for coronavirus. They just thought it was a little bug. They got sick and, they were off work for a couple of days and they came back. So if I were to pinpoint, okay, where at Ramey did, we potentially get a outbreak or an infection, whatever it may be, I can maybe pinpoint that. And, but at the time, no one was really, it was really pre any type of testing that was going on, anything like that. I think now we're in a place where we are starting to kind of move beyond just the reactionary daily kind of, respond to what's happening and figuring out, okay, how do we adapt to this new normal and kind of get back to our operating plans and things like that. So again, I think, being open the past 8 weeks, we were just like Sonia and SPI. I mean, we were figuring out on a daily basis and just kind of, day by day, figuring out what we need to do. I think now we're in a position where, there's a lot of return to work plans, things like that, everybody can leverage and learn from. So we were kind of the trailblazers going through it and responding to it.
Do you think you'll start going back to a strategic plan soon, or do you think
Yeah. Yep. No, definitely. So we're really starting to take a look at that, and I think everybody's ready for it. So everybody at our company is ready to just kind of get back to thinking about something other than coronavirus. So.
Yes. Okay, a comment came in. I think you both sharing will help us stay strategic, so thank you. So one question that came up is, where are you getting your PPE and your cleaning disinfectant supplies from?
So we got our PPE through some of our partners and manufacturers over in Asia. I got a ton of PPE in to support kind of us for a while. And our disinfectants, quite honestly, we were having people go to Meijer on a daily basis, Meijer and Walmart, and clean out the shelves for a while. So it literally was a daily shopping spree to try to pick it up.
Sonia?
We started out doing the same thing. I'd hit Meijer's, I'd hit Rite Aid, I'd hit Walmart. What can I grab? But since then, with the masks, we're getting that through our parent company, ABF. Associated British Foods has great contracts, so they're getting us in our masks. We had our safety manager, Mindy Harmon, she reached out to one of the distilleries. So we have the hand sanitizer in the gallon that they made instead of making vodka that smells like alcohol, but it works. So that's what we've been using to refill our hand sanitizing containers that are the pumps. We do have the wall ones in our suites, and we stocked up on that when this first started to happen. It's just the wipes that you can't find anymore. So our quality control lab has that 70% alcohol that they get in just for their normal operation. And they've got a bunch of that. So that's what we're gonna be switching to next, is that paper towels and the green plant cloths to clean.
If I could chime in on that one a little bit.
Yep.
Federal OSHA put out a directive saying that PPE that we have not allowed in the past necessarily from other countries is now being allowed if it has an approved laboratory stamp on it. Also, if you're going to be using the N95s, half face masks, full face masks for fit testing purposes, currently you should have it trying to be scheduled with your occupational doctor for the fit test and the medical evaluations. But due diligence is the key. Use is definitely, if you're going to mandate it, do it as close to the regulation as possible and stick with those approved masks that we've basically allowed from other countries at this point. Another thing is that NIOSH put out a fully encompassing list of every chemical available in America for disinfecting purposes of the coronavirus. So it's about it's several hundred pages or items long, and so look at that. It's not just Clorox. There's a whole lot of other disinfecting tools that you can use.
Thank you, Deb. You might as well stay unmuted. We got a couple questions for you. So how can we get timely MIOSHA updates? Is there something that we can subscribe to have those updates sent to us?
If you go to our webpage, right on that front page, there's a listserv to sign up for our email. We never bombard anybody. You usually get 1 or 2 items a week. I can't emphasize enough that MIOSHA does not enforce executive orders. That being said, local enforcement officers do. We enforce our rules and regulations. That was the list that I went through earlier. So right now you have the executive order to turn in a preparedness plan on June 1st. So.
And then since you have gotten, you've had the spike of 1,000 or 5,000.
A little bit, but it is really
right, 5,000%, right? And you can't enforce the executive orders. You can enforce your guidelines. Is there time to enforce those?
Is there time to enforce?
I mean, do you are you guys still in a reactionary mode to?
Yes, right now, our enforcement officers are considered essential employees. Our consultants are not. So we are not actually leaving and providing classes unless it's on a webinar, things along those lines. So all of our enforcement staff, typically they're going to be going out and they're not, and perhaps both of Sonia and Rob can answer this, but they're getting emails or phone calls and they're basically asking, what do you have in place? Can you send us documentation? They're going to review that information and say, hey, you're doing good, or you have some gaps here we would recommend. And if there is a flagrant, you're not doing anything, that's when we're going to send out enforcement officers.
Yeah, I can speak to that since we had experience with that, with the complaint that was filed. So we got a call from an enforcement officer it was a good conversation. We sent in our preparedness and response plan, everything we had done. It was right after we returned to work from our shutdown, and in our response, I sent along all of the communication that I had sent out, the videos that I recorded, kind of the training that we did, the return to work training, kind of sent that all in. And it was closed via phone relatively quickly. So
No in-person visit.
No in-person visit. So, and again, my recommendation would be, if you're following, you have the response plan, you're putting some of these things in place. Again, I didn't really worry about, I'm sure no one likes to get a call from an enforcement officer saying there's an OSHA complaint. But I felt very confident in what we had put in place, that it was really not going to be a major issue, and it turned out not to be.
And I have not gotten a call, so.
Yeah.
You do. It's nothing to panic about. I can't stress enough that emergency response plan or that return to work plan is going to be the key thing that they're looking for. Are you taking steps to protect your employees?
Okay, well, we have gone through all of our questions that our attendees have posed. I can't thank you guys enough for coming on today and sharing your insights and what you've learned and how you've done things. It's really, really helpful to the rest of us. So thank you so much for your time.